All right, let's just jump right in. We're going to tackle a question that's more than 200 years old, but you'll see it has never been more relevant. It's a question that modern philosophy has, well, never really managed to shake.
So I want you to picture this. The year is 1784. A popular German journal decides to put a question out to its readers. Now, this isn't like some Twitter poll today where we're just collecting opinions people already have. See, back then, they would ask the public about these huge, unresolved problems. And the question they posed was simple but absolutely massive. What is enlightenment?
And, a bunch of people sent in their thoughts, but one of the respondents was a guy you've probably heard of, the philosopher Immanuel Kant. And his short essay answering this question, it ended up becoming one of the most important minor texts in the entire history of philosophy.
But that brings us to the real heart of the matter. Why would a 20th century thinker, Michel Foucault, look all the way back at this little essay and see it as this huge critical turning point? What did he see in Kant's answer that speaks so directly to us, right here and right now? Well, that's what we're going to unpack.
So first, we have to go back and really get what Kant was originally arguing. For him, the Enlightenment wasn't some historical period that you just happened to live through. No, it was an action. It was a process. He called it a way out. A way out of what, exactly?
A way out of what he called immaturity. And his definition here is so key. For Kant, immaturity has nothing to do with your age. It's a state of mind. It's that state where we just accept somebody else's authority. We let them lead us in areas where we are perfectly capable of using our own reason.
And his examples are honestly just brilliant because they're timeless. He says it's immaturity when you let a book do your understanding for you instead of wrestling with the ideas yourself. Or when you let a spiritual guide basically become your conscience. Or even, he says, when you let a doctor just decide your diet for you without you thinking critically about it. In every single one of these cases, you're outsourcing your own reason. So for Kant, enlightenment is the Ausgang, that's the German word for the exit or the way out, from this state. And notice he calls it self-inflicted. We put ourselves in this position. It's not because we're not smart enough. It's because we just lack the courage to think for ourselves.
And that brings us right to the famous motto of the Enlightenment, sapere aude, dare to know. For Kant, this is the whole thing in a nutshell. Enlightenment is an act of personal courage. It's making the choice, having the audacity to use your own understanding.
Okay, so you might be thinking, great, so the idea is to question everything, be a total rebel. But this is where Kant's argument takes a really sharp and, frankly, pretty surprising turn. He's not calling for total anarchy. In fact, his idea of freedom has this fascinating paradox right at its center. He splits it into two different uses of our reason. First, there's what he calls the private use. Now, this is when you're acting like a cog in a machine. You're doing your job. You're a soldier on duty, a taxpayer filling out your forms, a pastor serving your congregation. In these specific roles, he says, your reason has to be submissive. You have to obey the rules for that task. But then there's the public use of reason. This is when you step outside of that specific job and you speak as a member of the human race, as a scholar or a citizen, talking to the whole world. And here, Kant says, your reason must be absolutely, totally free. And this just nails the paradox. The deal Kant is essentially proposing to the government of his day is this: obey, and you will be able to reason as much as you like. Do your job, follow the rules in your specific role, and that very obedience creates the stable society where you can then freely and publicly critique anything and everything. It's this wild idea that obedience could actually be the foundation for freedom. Okay, so that's Kant. It's a fascinating idea for sure, but maybe it feels a little distant, a little 18th century. Is this just a cool intellectual history lesson? Does it really have anything to do with our lives today? Well, according to Michel Foucault, the answer to that is a hard no. He says we've been looking at the Enlightenment all wrong. We shouldn't think of it as just a historical period or some dusty set of doctrines. We should see it as an attitude. And that one little shift in perspective, from an event in history to an attitude, well, it changes everything. By reframing it as what he calls an attitude of modernity, Foucault turns the Enlightenment from something you just read about in a textbook into a personal ethos, something you can actually practice.
So what is this attitude? It's a way of relating to right now, to the present moment. It's a voluntary choice you make to find something heroic, something eternal, inside the fleeting, messy, chaotic moment we're all living in. It's not about being modern, it's about how you actively engage with your own time.
Foucault borrows an idea from the poet Baudelaire to really paint a picture of this. He shows us two different figures. On the one hand, you have the flâneur. This is the idle stroller, the spectator who just kind of wanders around, passively collecting memories. He's a consumer of the present. But on the other hand, you have the man of modernity. This person is an active creator. He doesn't just watch the world go by, he dives into it, he grabs it, and he tries to wring some kind of lasting value out of it. He tries to make his own life a work of art.
So if the Enlightenment is this active, critical attitude towards our own lives, towards the present, then what does that actually mean for us? What's its true inheritance?
Well, Foucault says the very first step is that we have to refuse what he calls the blackmail of the Enlightenment. You know what this is. It's that simplistic, almost authoritarian demand that you have to be either for it or against it, that you either have to accept its entire rationalist project or throw the whole thing out. Foucault says, no, that's a false choice.
Because the real thread, the thing that connects us all the way back to Kant and his question, isn't some set of beliefs you have to agree with. It's the ethos itself. It's the practice of what Foucault calls a permanent critique of our historical era. That right there, that's the living spirit of the Enlightenment.
And this isn't just some vague idea. He actually breaks it down into a kind of practice. Step 1, analyze the limits. Look at the things we just assume are universal or necessary. Our ideas about sanity, about justice, about ourselves, and investigate where they came from. Step 2, investigate their origins. Find out what's not actually a timeless truth, but is maybe just contingent, the product of some arbitrary historical constraints. And step 3, experiment with freedom. Turn that critical analysis into a practical test on ourselves to see if we can go beyond those limits. It's a constant work we perform on ourselves.
And Foucault wraps all this up with this just beautiful, powerful phrase. He says this constant critical work is a patient labor giving form to our impatience for liberty. It's not a single revolution. It's a disciplined, ongoing effort to carve out more freedom for ourselves and for others.
Which brings us right back to the beginning, but with a modern twist. Kant asked us to challenge the books and the spiritual directors who thought for us. So for us today, who are those authorities? What experts, what ideologies, what social media algorithms are we letting take the place of our own understanding? In a world that is just drowning in information and influence, what would it really truly mean for us, right now, to dare to know?